transpersonal psychology, psychotherapy for 25 years. I've trained with Stan Grof, and we've developed this course in consultation with Grof Transpersonal Training in the United States. So I'll give you an overview of the course, and I will go off camera. So the graduate certificate in Grof Depth Psychology, we'll just go through the course outline. So the purpose is to provide participants with a framework for working with and supporting non-ordinary states of consciousness. And so the model that Stan Grof has developed is holotropic breathwork, but the protocols involved in working apply to any non-ordinary state, really. So meditative states, medicine states, all kinds of states that can be used to transform. These protocols can be applied to. We're also aiming in the course to provide participants with an experience of non-ordinary states of consciousness or enhanced state of awareness, and we do that through the application of holotropic breathwork on 3 residential workshops that we'll run in the course. The course will also introduce participants to the history of transpersonal psychology and its associated therapeutic technologies. This will be a brief introduction just to contextualise Grof's work into a broader history. And we want to also give people the opportunity to integrate into current areas of practice to engage a range of therapeutic tools. So we'll talk about some general supportive techniques, we'll talk about some general practice techniques, and we'll also talk about some of the intensification work that's involved in the holotropic model. So the course in large provides students with a brief overview of transpersonal psychology, importantly an understanding of Grof's theories, then how his theories fit both into the transpersonal and into other current psychotherapies. We'll look also at the healing potential of non-ordinary states, and this is one of Stan's major areas of interest, is the natural potential for people to find healing through supported and safe processes. We'll provide an introduction to holotropic breathwork. However, we're not in this course able to give you enough exposure to provide you with certification in holotropic breathwork. There would be some further work required to achieve that, but we'll give you the introduction and give you some experience to it. And we'll also look very clearly at the skills and ethics in best practice working with non-ordinary states. And this is a very critical area in this work, because we're dealing with, often with very, very intense experiences. We're dealing with people who are often in very open and trusting spaces. So as therapists, as facilitators, being very, very focused on what best practices involved, how to ethically hold a safety and hold a situation, a position, a group or an individual session for people, is a really critical aspect of non-ordinary state work. Often it's understated in a lot of this kind of work. We'll provide an understanding of Grof's theoretical paradigm, and Grof has got three core elements to his work, and I'll get onto those shortly. We'll go through basic key skills in facilitation, both at the individual and the group level. So these are more general skills around humanistic psychotherapy, and we found this is the best way to apply to holotropic breathwork. So using very, very basic principles around attunement, presence, resonance. These are the kind of factors, therapeutic factors that modern neuroscience is now supporting humanistic theories around how best to be present in a therapeutic relationship. We'll provide supported experiential work in holotropic breathwork. So this is really stepped through just how to have the experience, how to set up the experience, and helping people through the experience of the holotropic breathwork. We'll also provide experience in preparing and conducting both individual and group sessions. Again, we won't be providing sufficient training to conduct groups individually, but certainly you'll be on a pathway to understanding those skills. We'll provide key skills in supporting participants' healing journey, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later, but they're quite unique skills to the holotropic method. They're quite unique skills that share a lot of congruence with humanistic Rogerian therapy. It's also important to note that Grof's model and the holotropic breathwork that's derived from Grof's model has limitations. There isn't a solid evidence base for this work as a specific treatment. So what we present it as is an opportunity for people to explore rather than a cure or a therapeutic support. People can get therapeutic benefit from it, certainly, and we apply these skills in our other practice as well. We provide some discussion about research that's gone into the breathwork, and there have been a number of programs using Grof's model for addiction recovery and for other clinical applications, but there's not a lot of research support at the moment, which is why we've been working with the University of New England to try and embed some research into this area and really kind of test out some of the material involved in the model. A lot of the writing, and particularly a lot of Stan's writing, carries a lot of qualitative data, so a lot of anecdotal material. So there's a lot of stories about people having quite profound and meaningful experiences, but again, a lot of what's presented won't meet the parameters of scientific work. So it's an opportunity for anyone out there who's interested in theory and interested in research practice to really apply to this, and we're certainly involved in that with our consultation with the University of New England. Just very, very quickly touch on the transpersonal overview that we'll go through in the course, and the type of progenitors that we'll look at are William James, whose famous book, The Varieties of Religious Experience, could very well read the varieties of transpersonal experience in the modern time, as my friend Trail Dowie would often point. As James said, the greatest discovery of my generation is that a human being can alter his life by altering his attitude. And I guess that's one of the key aspects of state change work, is giving people an opportunity to experience themselves differently, see themselves differently, and have that supported by skilled facilitators.
Excuse me, Nigel.
Roberto Soggioli is
Sorry to interrupt. I just need you to turn your camera off. It's just a bit jumpy. Just the functionality will improve if you can switch that off.
I beg your pardon?
Just if you can switch off your camera. It's just a bit jumpy, that's all.
I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Perfect, thanks.
Roberto Soggioli is another progenitor, developed psychosynthesis. Carl Jung, people will be familiar with his work, and that talks greatly to the mass unconscious and has a strong relationship with Grof's work, but as Stan Grof himself would say, a very separate tradition. Humanistic psychology, and particularly Carl Rogers, is critical in particularly in the applied work that we'll be doing. Abraham Maslow then introduces as people would probably be aware, introduces the notion of peak experience and starts the transpersonal movement in its modern iteration, which is then carried on by people such as Stan Grof. Grof himself has derived this model inductively from research largely conducted in Prague, Czechoslovakia, back in the 50s and 60s. He was a research scholar and psychoanalyst, a psychiatrist working at a psychiatric institution when he started working with a group of other theorists and other researchers using lysergic acid as a treatment protocol for people with severe mental illness. There was a lot of very promising work that came out of the research, and a lot of the material was used to begin to develop these theories that we'll talk about shortly. That early work led to Grof being invited to a professorship at Harvard University, an associate professorship and a visiting scholar at Harvard for several years, and then he was given the opportunity to set up the Maryland Psychiatric Research Center in the late 60s, which was a forensic and psychiatric research program where he was able to continue to develop these theories and these observations that feed into the theories. Grof then moved to Esalen, where he was scholar in residence. He took over from Fritz Perls in 1973, and he worked there up until 1987. And it was in this time that he developed the holotropic breathwork model, largely or in part because he could no longer use the medicines that he had been researching previously, and so the breathwork was utilised as an alternative model for non-ordinary state work. There are three key aspects to Grof's writings. One is an extended cartography of mind, which I'll go into shortly. He focuses greatly on the healing potential of non-ordinary states, so very much the model of supported transformation, allowing people just the time and space, as long as it's done in a safe and ethical way. That healing is an inherent part of the individual. Stan's also known for his theories around spiritual emergency and spiritual emergence, which is primarily a non-pathologizing view of mental health. It has both strengths and weaknesses. So the healing potential of non-ordinary states is based around the notion of a COEX system, which is a system of condensed experience. It's a concept coined by Grof in 1976 to describe the way the human brain organises its experience. COEX is basically a set of related experiences organised around a powerful emotional centre. These can be positive or negative. So an example of a COEX might be someone who has a very early experience in a birth experience where there's a lot of fight and struggle to emerge, and then moves into life in a very, very aggressive and powerful way, and trains as an athlete and trains as a real achiever, and it's just filled with an energy that they can't really explain. And what Grof would say is that there's a dominant COEX running through this person's life that has a positive quality. Similarly, people can have a negative COEX, so someone who has severe problems in a birth process or in a early life experience can feel an entrapment, a loss of connection, an overwhelming sense of isolation, which can result in depression and these sort of things, which leads them to withdraw from life, leads them to not test themselves. Again, what Grof would talk about here is a negative COEX. And the idea is that through applied work, through supported transformative work, that those patterns can be redefined and people can be freed from these dominance of COEXs. So according to Grof, co-ex systems are organised around the root experience, as I was just explaining. And the root of the system, the co-ex root, is formed when powerful and emotionally charged experience becomes imprinted in the neural structures of the brain. Again, now I've got to emphasise that this is very theoretical work and based on observation. Subsequent experiences which the physical unit perceives will become filed along with the original memory trace. So that's what this idea of an initial struggle, for instance, initial constraint, becomes a kind of an energetic, almost like a magnet, attracting experience. So when people are faced with choices, they might choose to withdraw and create an increasingly complex narrative around that energetic core. At the centre of Grof's model is something called birth perinatal matrices, and this is core to Grof's theory, and he derived this material from observing both the reports that people were having in non-ordinary state work and also some of the art and the writings that they were creating as a result of these experiences. And he just coordinated and found that there were 4 basic patterns that seemed to relate back to birth experience as was defined in the art. So the first perinatal matrix, as he describes it, is related to the intrauterine existence before the onset of the delivery. The experience of the world can be referred to as the amniotic universe. The fetus in the womb does not have an awareness of boundaries and does not differentiate between the inner and the outer. This is reflected in the nature experiences associated with the reliving the memory of the perinatal state. So it's a blissful state generally when it's positive. He also has a model in the first matrix of negative states where there may be stress, there may be toxicity, there may be accident or illness, which creates a less healthy environment. But these are core experiences. And I'll just show you an image. So in the centre, this is just a diagram of how the first matrix might appear. And on either side of it are images that have come out of people's non-ordinary state experiences. So we can see on the right-hand side is a fetus in a bubble of light and energy connected to the energy flow of the universe, connected to these beautiful stars and this very expansive experience. The infant has a smile on his face or her face and is still connected to the womb, but the womb here is another globe of energy. It's just a symbolic representation of this blissful inner experience. And similarly on the left is the image of the amniotic universe. So you can see the dolphins and the jellyfish surrounding this child, again encased in this energetic core that looks really beautiful, and the child looks relaxed and quite at peace in the world. And this characterised by a coex running through someone's life would be someone who, in a positive way, feels very connected to the world, very connected to nature, very connected to other people. It'd be a very, very positive experience, but that person may have problems with boundaries. They may not understand where they end and other people begin, or they may, be too forthcoming or too giving. These are the kind of features that the coex carries. In the second perinatal matrix, BPM2, that talks about cosmic engulfment and no exit or hell. This is, while reliving the onset of biological birth, we feel that we're being sucked into a gigantic whirlpool or swallowed by some mythic creature. We might also experience that the entire world or cosmos is being engulfed. This can be associated with images of devouring or entangling archetypal monsters, such as leviathans, dragons, whales, vipers, giant snakes, tarantulas, or octopuses. The sense is an overwhelming threat and can lead to intense anxiety and general mistrust bordering on paranoia. That's the expression. This is the root energy. This is a root cause that Grof would talk about, someone who might present with paranoia, distress, anxiety. This is the theoretical underpinnings that he would point to in his model. Another experiential aspect is the beginning of the second matrix is a theme descending into the depths of the underworld, into the death or hell. It's part of Joseph Campbell's motif of the hero's journey. It's the passage into the darkness, the passage into hell. And what you can see in this diagram is it's the beginning of the birth process, basically, where the uterus is going into convulsion, into contraction. There's an incredible amount of pressure placed on the fetus. However, the cervix hasn't dilated, so the head is pressed into the wall, and the fetus is undergoing an incredible amount of stress and pressure. Again, you can see a couple of images. On the right is a spider that's wrapped the infant in this sort of swaddling bandage, this real sense of encasement and entrapment. And on the left, you've got a fetus entering into a vortex and into this swirling, out of control place with a skeleton there. And you can see in both faces there's distress and there's tension and angst. And commonly, Grof would see these processes as being expressed through some of these non-ordinary state processes. The third perinatal matrix is the death-rebirth struggle. Many aspects of this rich and colourful experience can be understood from its association with the second clinical stage of biological delivery, which is the propulsion through the birth canal. After this opens the head, it descends into the pelvis. In this stage, the uterine contractions continue. The cervix is dilated and allows gradual propulsion of the fetus through the birth canal. This involves a lot of crushing and mechanical pressures, pains, and often a high degree of anoxia and suffocation. A natural concomitant of this highly uncomfortable and life-threatening situation is an experience, again, of intense anxiety. So you're getting the sense that the second and third matrix tend to carry a charge that can be potentially quite negative later in life. And again, we can see the intensification of pressure on the fetus in this diagram. On the left-hand side is a piece of art by Hans-Rudi Giger, who is a friend of Stan Grof's, and I had the opportunity to spend several weeks at Giger's castle in Switzerland at one stage, surrounded by endless images of what Stan would describe as the third matrix. You can see the baby there at the top of the image, encased in this mechanical world of constraint and confinement. On the right-hand side is a picture of Kali, the goddess of destruction, birth from the Hindu tradition. Terrible birth, terrible destruction, but also life and regeneration. The fourth perinatal matrix, BPM4, that's the death-rebirth experience, and this matrix is related to the third clinical stage of delivery, to the final expulsion from the birth canal and the severing of the umbilical cord. Experiencing this matrix, we complete the difficult process of propulsion through the birth canal, achieve explosive liberation and emergence into light. This can also be accompanied by concrete and realistic memories of various spiritual aspects of the state, special aspects of the stage of birth, and these can include the experience of anesthesia, the pressure, the forceps, and the sensations associated with various obstetric manoeuvres, postnatal interventions. So it can be a difficult and tense experience, the fourth matrix, but it has this resolution out into connection when the experience is a positive one. So you can see again in these images on the right, Phoenix rising from the flames and the ashes, the rebirth experience of the bird of recreation, and then on the left you have another powerful image of this emergence into the light from the tendrils of the other world, and in the image of the infant, blissful, pleasant, calm, happy, connected to, or free from the constraints of the womb. There are negative aspects of this this fourth matrix, which often involve medical interventions and medication at birth. So that summarises, or that gives you an idea of Grof's ideas of the coex and the birth perinatal matrices. Just talk briefly about his other area of interest, which is spiritual emergency, and sometimes called spiritual emergence. And the distinction between emergency and emergence was really employed to try and make a distinction between catastrophic events that change people's lives very, very quickly in a kind of a negative way, which may sometimes involve psychiatric care, and processes that are slow and more emergent and may still be distressing, but do take more time and are sometimes easier to support. There's a really famous American psychologist called David Lukoff who writes about a spiritual emergency process that he went through as an undergrad in his early 20s. I won't go into it in a lot of detail, but essentially he went into a state where he believed that he could bring together all the religions of the world, wrote a book about it, and his friends realised that he was not in a great place. They held him, supported him, kept him safe. The process resolved itself, and he went on to complete a PhD. He writes about it. It's public document, so you'd be able to look up David Lukoff. But the spiritual emergency categories that Grof talks about are shamanic crisis, which is sometimes called the shamanic illness, sudden and spontaneous, medical condition which can emerge into a state of knowledge and awareness once it is supported and allowed to move through. The awakening of Kundalini, which is a Hindu process where the body just goes through a very, very rapid and sudden energetic shift, often seen as psychotic. You've got episodes of unity of consciousness, which equate to Maslow's peak experiences. You also have the idea of the psychological renewal through return to the centre, which was a concept developed by John Weir Perry, a Jungian analyst and psychiatrist who worked at UCLA in the 70s and built two facilities in his career in which he took early onset young people, first incident psychosis, and over a period of 60 days supported a process and had reportedly very high remission rates with really good follow-up results. Unfortunately, the work wasn't continued. But again, his work is published and can be generally found. Crisis of psychic opening is another of Grof's categories. Past life experience he spends time talking about. Communication with spirit guides and channeling. And all of these can either be slow emergent states or can just come upon people suddenly. Past life experiences, people can spontaneously have an experience that doesn't feel to be their own biographical state, and that can be incredibly distressing and disorienting for them. Near-death experiences, which have been very heavily researched, and I've worked with a number of people who have had these kind of experiences and had them quite quickly shut down, which creates often very, very negative experiences for them. Close encounters with UFOs and alien abduction experiences, which John Mack wrote about and famously almost lost his job at Harvard because he wouldn't conclude that it was completely delusional. Possession states, which people will be familiar with, and alcohol and drug addiction. So what Grof is talking about is really a non-pathological look at major shifts and in people's centre of operation. Similar to what's being induced in a non-ordinary state in some ways, so we can have analogues of these experiences emerge in non-ordinary state work. Important to understand them. And I just put a proviso there that really you don't assume that people are going through spiritual emergency. You really need to be able to check a professional assessment. Never make assumptions in regard to these conditions, because psychosis can look like other things, and it's always important that people are made safe, and the etiology of conditions is really clearly understood before looking at it as a spiritual emergence or emergency. We'll move on now just to the principles of the holotropic breathwork practice, and this is really the principles of Grof Depth Psychology, or Grof Depth Psychotherapy. And really what we're looking for is careful participant selection, so being able to make sure that we've got people that have got sufficient psychological mindedness, that are safe and supported in their lives, that have a reasonable degree of capacity to integrate and support when we're working with them and between sessions. Ethical standards, as I've said, are very, very critical in this work. People will tend to trust facilitators if they've had a really good experience, or had a really powerful transformative experience. So it's very, very important that we hold our position as facilitators, we hold boundaries, we recognise that people will project onto us all sorts of ideas and hopes and aspirations. Absolutely fundamental to this work is the notion of just support. In the breathwork itself, colleague and the principle of Grof Transpersonal Training, Tav Sparks, talks about support is the fundament of what we do. That's really the core. And if you're talking to someone in a counselling session and trying to work with emergent states, or trying to work with some kind of meditative or trance state, support is principle there. Same with state change work such as holotropic breathwork. Support all the time. Doing, not doing is another term that Tav likes to use, and this is really talking about when you have an idea about something that's happening for someone, particularly when they're in a regress state or a non-ordinary state, you're best just to hold back. Just make sure that they're safe. It's not about running up to them with the tissues or grabbing their hand and trying to support them if they're distressed. That would be projecting our own need into the session, and this is a really important thing in the training, to really get a quality of when to move forward, when to stay back, how to best support. We also look very much at the principles of the obligation to follow up, and when people are trusting us with this work, we really do need to keep an eye on them, often, particularly with the breath work, but with other intensifications in just one-on-one work. We really do want to be able to just follow up. People might take 3 or 4 days for some major process to emerge, so it's always a good idea to just check in. And there's an obligation on our part to ensure social support. So if someone's coming to us for help and wants to go into these deep places, we don't do it if they're going out to a very lonely life that's unsupported, because it's just too risky. There have been a lot of recent developments in non-ordinary state work, with massive increases in the use of meditation and yoga, of various modalities. Shamanic practices are now increasingly popular. Vision Quest, Sweat Lodge, this kind of process. Again, all about state change, all about non-ordinary state work, and the principles that we're teaching in this program apply to any of these kind of techniques. Whenever, as a facilitator, we're taking people into a place inside themselves or supporting that process of them going inside themselves, then it's incumbent on us to have a really good set of skills to make that safe and to give people the best opportunity to derive benefit and to allow the healing process to take its own shape and form. MAPS is the Multidisciplinary Association of Psychedelic Studies. They've been involved in funding a lot of research and pushing for a lot of clinical research now across the world. Rick Doblin, very central to that work. There's been a proliferation in the number of different studies using traditional and recently developed medicines over the last 10 years or so. Heart psilocybin studies, there's various other ayahuasca studies going on around the world, and being done in very clear and very scientific and very safe and supported environments. And certainly we don't condone the use of any illegal chemicals or anything like that. So, these are things that are being done in very, very safe and clinically supported environments. Michael Mithofer has recently produced some really good outcome studies, since the Journal of Pharmacology, published in 2010. He was doing research into treatment-resistant PTSD, and he used MDMA intervention as the vehicle for non-ordinary state, and the protocols for supporting those processes are the protocols that have been developed around Grof's work and around holotropic breathwork. So this is really important stuff. So whether we're using this to apply to our work in one-on-one material, or using it in more non-ordinary state processes, this is a very much a structured model of working. Stages of HB, holotropic breathwork practice, and for one-on-one processes in general. So there's a process of preparation. The person expresses interest. We get medical information, background information about them. We then go through a process of introducing the process, explaining some of Grof's models, some of the potential ideas and experiences that people can have. We look at group or individual preparation, depending on what those circumstances are. If it's a group process, we look at contracts involved in the group. We then go through, in the holotropic work, we go through a group process or an individual process that involves relaxation, and then we enter people into a quicker and deeper process of breathing, set to a structure of music. The end of the sessions, when there's energetic blocks, we will do some focused body work with people. The end of the sessions, we look at integration, and you saw some of the artwork earlier around integration work. And again, support is a key function here, supporting the people through this process. There are a number of contraindications, particularly the holotropic participation, so cardiovascular problems, including abnormal and untreated blood pressure, glaucoma, pregnancy. Really, you can't do any kind of non-ordinary state work with people that are physically unwell or physically in a less than optimal place. So you don't want to do any intensification work with focusing, with meditation, with any kind of kundalini processes, any accelerated breathing techniques that are not full holotropic. You really want to be very, very careful with who you're working with, and have a very, very clear understanding of their medical history and where they're at. And if there's any doubt, we will always take supervision, and we will also ask that people provide releases from their treating doctors if we're in doubt. Recent surgery is again something that you don't want to be going through any kind of intensification process, holotropic or any other process with. Epilepsy is again very, very problematic with any kind of non-ordinary state work. So you have to be very, very careful with this kind of presentation. There is some circumstances where, provided you've got medical support, it might be appropriate, but again, you would only do that when you're in consultation with medical professionals. Asthma can be a problematic area with accelerated breathing, and with inhalers that can often again rectify the problem. Mental illnesses will generally contraindicate breath work or any non-ordinary state work, particularly in the case of bipolar disorder, paranoid personality disorder. These sort of intensification processes, although people may be very insistent on doing them, again, this is where our duty of care is absolutely critical, and when in doubt, always know, and always be very, very careful with understanding where people are at and what kind of support they're receiving once they leave our sessions. So here's a series of creative mandalas that have come out of breathwork sessions, and again you can see the kind of work that comes out of this non-ordinary state work really can be quite powerful, quite colourful, quite spiritual. People have quite extraordinary experiences. They can have experiences of this ilk when we're using the protocols without using a holotropic intervention. People can have quite powerful intensification just by creating the safety in a counselling consult, where you create safety for people, you allow them to reflect, you allow them to intensify, they feel safe and trusting to follow a process inside their bodies. And so often after a counselling session, people can generate this kind of artwork as well when adequately supported and encouraged. So I hope that gives you some overview of what our training is involving. We're really trying to give people a sense of, as I said, the protocols involved in non-ordinary state work. We're going to use holotropic breathwork as a particular example of non-ordinary state work, but the principles that we will be training in this program can be applied under any kind of circumstance, and in fact can be quite central to counselling and any kind of helping work, understanding these basic principles of support, presence, non-pathologizing, safety, ethical boundaries, etc. So I hope this has been helpful for you, and thank you for your time. And if there are any questions.
Thanks, Nigel. There's certainly no questions. I've been answering some as they've popped up. So we'll just give it a moment and see if there's any questions from the group. We'll take feedback, anything else that you want to know. I've got a question here about the course, and specifically the course cost. Our intention was to actually offer this qualification in 2017. That said, if it's viable from a student interest perspective and obviously a trainer resource perspective, IKON could definitely consider scheduling this as a mid-year intake. So in terms of the cost, it hasn't been finalised. One of those factors is the recent vet reforms that's been introduced, and namely the cap that all RTOs have had placed on them. So I guess it's certainly something we can look at. We've got two options on the plate, and one whether it's covered by vet fee help, or the other one where it's not, and it's a cost by instalment. And I guess those factors will affect the cost and the delivery timetable. So I guess my suggestion to you is if at the end of the webinar you can indicate that you're interested, and we can certainly follow that up in terms of the cost for the qualification as well as the delivery schedule. Again, I've just got another question here which states the course will be offered. Again, look, depending on where the interest is, we currently have campuses in Queensland, Brisbane and Perth, and also have sessional space in Melbourne. So they would be our preferred options to start. But again, if we had a cohort of of students that were interested from another state, we'd certainly look at it, because we, in our own courses, do fly trainers state by state depending on their specialty, so that certainly wouldn't be a barrier. Okay, that's it, I think, for questions. And again, if you have any other questions, certainly email info@ikoninstitute.com.au at any time. My email address does come up at the end of the webinar as well, and obviously at the survey if you want to put comments or questions in. All feedback greatly appreciated, and also the opportunity if you've got other questions you want to ask. All right, I think that's probably it.
Excellent.
All right, all good. Well, thank you, Nigel. Appreciate your time. Certainly appreciate your knowledge and expertise, and thank you everybody for attending. Your attendance and interest is very appreciated. So good night. Thank you.
Thank you.